Hey everyone, it's Mary Ann from the New York City Organization of Public Service Retirees. This is the third installment on the Labor Law 101. We are discussing the Pittsburgh Glass case and how it correlates to us. In about 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, we shared with you a video that we had made about the MLC attorney Alan Klinger admitting that the legislation isn't illegal and that what it does was putting pressure. He said it's not illegal by itself, but what it would do is put pressure on the city, because if it had to pay money towards those retiree healthcare, it would be less than it would be spending on active workers. Now, if that's not a union leader or a union attorney, labor chair, how he's a labor chair appointed, and yet he represents multiple unions at the same time. And then if you start to look at all the LM2s across the city, you'll start to see how many millions of dollars this firm makes in representing unions. The MLC paid him over $800,000 alone last year. The United Federation of Teachers was over 1.1 million when we stopped looking. DC 37, same kind of the numbers. You just got to keep looking through these LM2s on the Department of Labor website to see what this firm makes by basically pitting one union against the other and then pitting them all against their retirees. This has to stop. This is not what labor is about. We're better than this. But I want to show you that one of the things that he said was Intro 1099 by Councilman Barron that would require the city to offer a Medigap plan. Our plans that cost about $200 a month. Unlike your plans, the active worker plans that cost about $920 a month for a single plan and for an individual, and about $23 or $2,500 a month for a family plan. For Medicare retirees are the cheapest cost to the city, okay? He told the MLC leaders that our plans, that the bill that would offer us a Medigap plan was not really illegal, but what it would do is put a financial burden on the city, because if the city had to pay money for us, it was less it was paying for you. So basically, you're arguing against your own people, but you're not taking up issue with how the city's spending the rest of its money. You're okay with the city spending money on healthcare for high school students for mental health, or putting in mental health for LGBTQ, or putting in healthcare for sex workers, or putting in healthcare for asylum seekers. But you're okay with stripping away healthcare and diminishing healthcare for a former union brother and sister. This is what we're not understanding. Your union leaders are telling you that Medicare Advantage is not a diminishment because it gives you more, it's enhanced benefits. What does that mean? Can you define that? Let me tell you what that means. They basically gave you a gym pass or rides with Access-A-Ride. And if you're reading the Daily News today, you're realizing how horrible Access-A-Ride is, that you have to wait hours and hours to get these rides. We took a group of 70 retirees to Washington, D.C. One of the retirees that sat next to us had been trying for an hour to get Access-A-Ride to pick her up, and we were still on the train in New Jersey. And they kept canceling on her and wouldn't show up. We had to Uber her home. That's not the way this should work. So you're giving me a perk, which isn't really a perk. It's a really bad benefit, and telling me it's enhanced and I'm supposed to accept that in replacement of you diminishing my healthcare access to doctors and specialists around the country, and then forcing me to undergo prior authorizations because you want my value for your raise. The Transit Workers Union, MTA, TW 100, the MTA told TW 100, you give us that Medicare plan for those retirees and stick your retirees into Medicare Advantage plans, we'll give you a raise. And they did. I bet you don't know that, do you? And this is where we are. I want you to listen, and then I want to connect you to the next case and closing up Pittsburgh Glass so you could hear what we hear. This is the video that we filmed last week.
With someone there, legal, maybe Alan, just explain it in further detail and expound upon how it's gonna affect collective bargaining rights.
It freezes health, the one, it freezes health benefits to where it was in December 31st.
That's not true. Our legislation from Councilman Barrow in Intro 1099 requires that the city provide a supplemental plan, a Medigap plan, that was like what was in effect on December 31, 2021. It doesn't freeze healthcare. It doesn't freeze collective bargaining or negotiating. It specifically states that the city must provide a Medigap plan like what was in effect on December 31.
It obligates a Medigap supplement plan without saying how it would be paid for.
And that's not true either, because since 1967, when 12-126 was legislated in the administrative code, the city has been paying for Medigap plans or any cost to a Medicare retiree. Why? Because the city is required to pay up to the HIP HMO rate, and our Medigap plans are under the HIP HMO. That's why the city has been paying for Medicare eligible retirees out of the general budget. This does not get paid by the unions, and it does not get paid out of the stabilization fund. Unlike the teachers, DC 37, fire, police, etc. Their premium differences between HIP and GHI are paid out of the stabilization fund. Medicare eligible retirees don't get paid by the unions, and they don't get paid out of the stabilization fund.
And concern is that the city will then adversely impact other aspects of healthcare for actives and others because of that.
And so the one line in the legislation that speaks to it not doing that. What do you think the effect of that line?
And what he's referring to is the second line of the legislation. So the first line is a two-line legislation. The first one says the city must provide a Medigap. The second one says that nothing in this bill prevents the unions from collectively bargaining for their unit members, right? We're not a unit member. We're not a union member. We don't collectively bargain. They can't collectively bargain for us. Our bill does not affect them. They can negotiate anything they want. Why? Because they collectively bargain. So this representative from the PBA is actually asking, well, what are you making out of this bill? The second sentence says it doesn't do that. What do you think the effect of the line is? That's the reference. Wait for the answer.
It says it will not affect collective bargaining. Is that throw away the line?
Yeah, but it can't by itself determine what happens for actives. But what it'll do is put enormous financial pressure on what the city says to us it's willing to pay for actives if they have to pay so much more for retirees.
And right there it is. This bill cannot affect the actives. Coming from the attorney for the MLC, Alan Klinger. He represents the MLC, the United Federation of Teachers, some unions in DC 37, sanitation. There's so much conflict going on right here. It's unbelievable. But he just let it out of the bag. The MLC, the active unions, do not collectively bargain for current retired persons. This bill cannot by itself affect them, but what it does do, in his opinion, is that because the city is paying for us, Medicare retirees, the cheapest people the city has to pay for, it would mean that it would want to pay for them less because their plans are so much more expensive. And the funny thing is, I didn't even have to talk. The other me said everything. And that's exactly the point. And yet you guys aren't listening. Active workers do not represent active unions. Unions do not represent current retirees. You cannot collectively bargain for us. And no, our bill is not illegal. Alan Klinger is just saying that how he's interpreting how it's illegal or how it would interfere with collective bargaining is because if the city is taking its little pot of money and it's spending on retirees that actually earned it, it's less that they're going to spend on them. Because what will happen is, just because this is happening to us today by you, don't think this isn't going to happen tomorrow. After you're gone, if Mr. Klinger is still there, he'll be selling you out to the next generation. This isn't the way labor should be behaving. So now let's go back and finish the labor case, because I want you to actually see that.
Now, to say that these retirees who have no bargaining strength whatsoever, who are not competing for jobs, they're not competing for wages, that they present such a threat to these active employees who have the power to shut down this operation anytime to get their demands, and say that these retirees threaten them so much that the actives have to have control over their benefits, I think becomes almost an absurd argument. And I don't think that Oliver was intended to go that far at all. In no case, prior to this one, has the board ever come to this court or any other court and made the argument that a union has the exclusive right to represent people who are not in the bargaining unit. And the board admits here that retirees are not in the bargaining unit. In fact, the board has uniformly excluded them from all bargaining units, saying they do not have a community of interest with the active employees and probably are not employees at all. They've excluded them, and they excluded them here. They set up a unit of only active employees. They did not include these people. It seems to me that there is one aspect of the act, that is the industrial democracy aspect, which I would like to discuss next.
And there you go. It's absolutely absurd that a union would raise the issue of a retiree, that they would have to control a retiree's healthcare benefit, someone that's not even in their unit. That is dangerous. Guy Farmer was a labor attorney, labor representative, represented many unions and also in the NLRB. So by listening to the MLC argue that you're taking control over the active workers are taking control over retiree healthcare benefits because it would in some way impede them is a farce. And I think I've rested my case. Have a great night, everybody. And just remember, keep coming back. We're going to keep proving this, even now going into local cases, as well as affidavits filed by OMLR. OLR's former name was Office of Mayor's Office of Labor Relations. Affidavits, as well as Bob Lynn's own words, the former Director of Labor Relations, as well as OCB cases, Office of Collective Bargaining. Bringing it home. Have a great night.